Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning, Thursday morning, August the 11th. I'm glad to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. Run for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. The chat room is actually I'm trying to put the chat room up right now, and it's having some difficulties. So there's some errors or something. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully it'll come up here in a second. But thanks everybody for being here. I appreciate everybody who's been tuning into my shows and taking the time to listen. And the chat room just popped in there, so it's all good. And we're looking at Robert Berney's web pages, and Robert Berney is he's a codependence counselor. He's a grief counselor. He's a spiritual teacher. He's an author, and he's written a book called Codependence: The Dance of Wounded Souls. And it's a great book, and his website is really awesome. He's got some lovely information here, really dealing with a whole wide range of stuff. Codependency, inner child work, relationship type stuff. And so, it's really good to go through the site index if you haven't done that. So that's from www.joy2meu.com. And that's Robert Berney's web pages. And, he's got an extensive amount of information there that he's written, and he's a prolific writer. Like you can see, he's been writing for years and years. And, it's good stuff. I'm really getting a lot out of it. So I hope other people are too. And, so I'm really mainly looking at the inner child work on his web pages, as well as the codependent stuff, which we already covered. We've been on his website for about 3 months now, probably getting close to 3 months. And, that's a long time, but it's good information. So I hope people are getting something out of it. So thanks everybody for being here. You have to listen at your own discretion. I'm talking about abuse, and abuse is a sensitive subject. You have to know, what's good for you to listen to. And if you feel like the topic of abuse might bother you, then you need to turn the show off. You just need to not listen to it, right? It's your discretion. So listen at your own discretion. And young people under the age of 18, I just ask that you have permission to listen to my shows. And, because I don't have any idea how young the people are who are listening. And, hold on just a second. I don't have any idea how young the people are who are listening to my shows. And so, I just ask if you're under the age of 18 that you would have someone listen to the show with you who's an adult who can help you make a decision whether you want to, who you should be listening age appropriately, right? So we're looking at Robert Berney's through the process of inner child healing through the fear. And this was the third part. He wrote three pages really specifically looking at the recovery process for inner child healing, through really as far as what he's found and in his own process, right? And he says the third one is looking, sort of looking at for the recovery through the fear, getting around the fear. And so he says here, I'm just reading right from his webpage. He says, because our ego was programmed to react to life from fear, negativity, scarcity, and lack, again due to emotional trauma we experienced in the messages and role modeling of the adults around us, the disease focuses on and magnifies fear. And then it scrambles around trying to find something to cover up and repress the very fear it's generating. So the disease blows the fear way out of proportion and then leads us to addictive or compulsive behavior as a way of stuffing the fear. Excuse me. And he says, I had to learn to accept and honor my fears and my resistance in order to stop fighting the growth process so much. So he said, then I could start to align myself with the growth process and make my experience of life easier and more enjoyable. Then I could start to understand that faith is not the absence of fear. Faith is having the courage to face my fears and walk through them so I can reach the next level of growth. So I like what he has to say. And then he goes on, and we're sort of just working our way through the page of emotional balance through the fear. So I just woke up, actually, so I've only been up for a couple minutes. So we sort of reading through here yesterday, and, he says sometimes, anytime we say stuff like, I can't help it, that's just how I am, or that's just how I've always been, or that's just me, that type of statement, he says, we are being the victim of the false self-image that we built up to protect ourselves. So we are empowering our codependence. I can't is almost never a true statement, he says. The true statement is I choose not to. So if we say, I can't change, I'll never change, this is the way I am, really we're just saying I choose not to, because there's no such thing as not being able to change, right? And that's the truth. Like some of these behaviors that we take on as adults, maybe they worked at some point in our lifetime for some reason, but then they don't work now, you know what I mean? Just dysfunctional, and just maybe even self-sabotaging, right? And so many times people will say, well, I don't know how to change, I can't change. I heard that from my abuser parents all my life. Um, I've heard that from other people too, and it's a really sad, sorry excuse. It's a sad, sorry cop-out is what it is. People can change, and they don't have to continue on in those behaviors, and none of us do. We can all change, we can all grow, and it's a matter that they choose not to. They don't want to bother. Maybe they don't think there's any worth or value in it. Sometimes people like to keep maladapted, abusive, self-sabotaging behaviors around themselves, right? And sometimes it's a comfort level. They're used to living like that. And that was my parents, even when they were brought up on charges. I mean, they told the social workers, like, this is our life. This is what we do. We've been doing this forever. Like, how could we change? You know what I mean? Like, and really, it's just that they didn't want to change. They just wanted to continue to batter each other, and physically and verbally and in every other way. And they just wanted to continue to hurt their children because they didn't want to change, right? They didn't want to try to be better parents. They didn't want to try to be better husband and wife, It wasn't worth it to them to do that. There has to be some value in it. If we're going to make a change, I mean, most people, human race, most people are not motivated unless they really want something, you know what I mean? So if people don't want to change, they'll quite often say, oh, well, I can't change. But it's just that they don't want to. Right, and they should just be honest about it, admit it, instead of just trying to hide around saying that I can't. You know what I mean? Like, I know myself, I'm working on changing some of the behaviors that I picked up along the way, and especially the ones that are sort of self-sabotaging and not getting me anywhere now as an adult. You know what I mean? So it's not that I can't change. I just choose. I've been just putting it off myself. You know what I mean? So over the last 4 years, I've been really working on this, and it's true. We can change some of this stuff. There's no reason why we can't. But he says we cannot make choices until we realize that we have the right to make choices. So growing up in environments that taught us that life was about right and wrong, was black and white, caused us to be afraid of making choices for fear of doing it wrong. So we were powerless to make choices as long as we thought the only choice was being right and wrong. Because as long as we believed that, we were in reaction to old tapes. And that's just from being a child, being, always maybe trying to do the right thing, and it never was good enough. Or, even in a situation where there could have been a coach or a teacher that was, you could never do things right, and always being made to feel like you just didn't measure up. And then as children being abused, we of course don't have choices in that, right? So you get the message that, hey, you don't have choices, and there's really no way around it, which is actually very false. And so we were sort of looking at this stuff, so we'll just scroll down through the page. And he said, ourself, here's where we sort of left off. He said our self is made up of a myriad of relationships. So we have a relationship with our own mind, our body, our emotions, our soul, our gender, our sexuality, our concept of a higher power. We learn to relate to ourselves according to how our father, our mother, our siblings, our classmates, our teachers, our relatives, etc. related to us. And so the events of our life added dimensions and flavors to our relationship with ourselves. So the ways in which we experienced ourselves in those early years were through what we felt and the reflections that we saw in the eyes of the people around us. So in the ways in which people reacted to and behaved toward us, right? So this is very interesting, I think, because most people, when you grow up, you're not told that you have a relationship with yourself. It's all about, how, trying to teach a child how to behave with others, not even really with themselves. It's kind of like, and there's where the shame and the blame and the shame stuff kind of comes in, because the parent will say stuff like, you're a bad kid, you need to straighten up, or just because of, and instead there's other ways to do it. See, they don't have to put that on their child, but they do quite often. And or you're just worthless or whatever, right? And what that teaches the child, since the parent thinks that about the child, and the child sees that that's the case in looking at their parents' eyes, and they can see that that's the vision that their parents or one of their parents has for them. They pick that up as their own self-image, and that's what I was talking about yesterday. That's exactly what it is. It's sort of, I see myself as how my parents saw me, and so my inner self. I don't feel like the whole world sees that. That's just how I feel, this little wounded inner person that I was for so long. Really that image was given to me by my parents, for sure it was. And then later on by one of my brothers. So this is the thing. that image is really just an image that my parents gave me. That's not the true image of myself. And so I need to learn how to kind of go back in there and correct that, you know what I mean? And I'm going to be working on that now, for a while. So he said that the ways in which we experience ourselves in those early years were through what we felt and reflections we saw in the eyes of the people around us. That's how people see us, and the ways in which people reacted and behaved toward us. So we had to learn to define and defend ourselves in the best ways we could, because the reflections we saw, the behaviors we experienced, were coming from people who were wounded and reactive, angry and scared, hurt, ashamed. They were the ones with the problems. See, when little children, when you're born, you don't have any problems. The only nightmare that you may have as a child is whoever happens to get a hold of you. And that's the truth of it. Children should never end up the way that we do as adult survivors, and society really messed up with these really ridiculous belief systems and absolutely codependent, and really diseased, actually, the society. And so there's no reason why a child should end up like that. It's just we can't help it, because we're just growing up in these homes and growing up in this world of this this dysfunction, you know what I mean? And so it's really unfortunate, but that's the way it really is. And so he says we learn to relate to ourselves, to other people, and to the life process in early childhood, and then had more experiences in growing up and as adults that reinforced in different ways the original experiences. So he says we have layer upon layer of attitudes, definitions, and beliefs that are a factor in how we relate to ourselves until we become aware of how those events, traumas, experiences, etc. have affected us. We cannot change how we react in the situations that stimulate memories of those incidents, cannot diffuse and disempower the reactive buttons that have been running our lives. So that's really interesting, and that's kind of where, I really like what he has to say there. I think that's very well exactly what I'm starting to see in my healing process, is that as I go through and I take a look at some of the stuff that happened, by doing that and actually going back and getting in touch with how I was feeling, at the time, and what I needed to feel as a child and didn't get to feel properly, and what I needed as a child to sort of counteract that trauma or that abuse, right? Which would have been nurturing, comforting, something, the higher power saying, you didn't deserve that, and of course you deserve so much better, you're a beautiful child, and, this kind of stuff, I kind of go back in and reparent myself, there's nobody else who can really do that for me. And so basically, in order for me to, in order to move through this stuff, that's really what I've had to do. So it's sort of, there was many places that I got kind of stuck at, because of that. And so those are the places where I'm actually going back in and getting a hold of myself and doing the work and saying, what do I need to do here to be able to move past this? For so long, I wasn't even looking at it. It was too painful, and it was just too, it's just too discouraging. And so I was just stuffing a lot of it. And so now I'm actually allowing myself in the last 4 years to actually go back there, and fix it, because I'm really the only one that can. So it is helping. It's taking a little bit longer than who knows. I didn't know how long I'd be on my healing journey here. You know what I mean? I didn't realize it would be maybe a lifetime thing, and that I'd be always kind of looking for this help, whatever I can find to get the information. I really had no idea when I started out, but I was just committed to do it, and just committed to care about myself instead of just letting myself continue on that road of depression and just being down and not being able to deal with life situations because of the situations I went through in my past. So it was kind of ridiculous, like that my past was running my present, right? That those little inner children that were wounded were actually in charge of the bus, and you can't let the little children drive the bus, right? They're not supposed to, so they don't know how to drive. So, as an adult, I had to go back and look at that and say, okay, what am I doing that's self-sabotaging? What am I doing that is really keeping me back, and holding me back in life? And I like what Robert Berney has to say. It's really quite interesting. He says it is vitally important to start shifting or sifting through the layers in order to see life as it really is, and to learn how to be honest with ourselves. So we have lived our adult lives in reactions to our childhood wounds and programming. So that's many people, and actually most people, if not all people. That was me throwing that there. Our patterns in relationships, all relationships with other people, with money, with work, with our own bodies, etc., are symptoms of our childhood wounding. So, and actually, I mean, really, when you think about it, that's very true. And the reason why it's true is because when children grow up, they're little sponges. They're just little sponges, and they will soak up everything around them. So if it's abuse and it's negative and it's violent, that's what they're going to soak up, right? If it's abuse and it's neglect and it's just that the parents don't meet their needs, that's what they're going to soak up, you know. Or if a child's nurtured, loved, and cared for, and taught, you know, properly, you know, that there's consequences in life, and that, you know, but doesn't shame the child and doesn't make the child feel any lesser than, and just brings that child up properly, you're going to have pretty much a healthy adult. And you know, I think that's the difference, right? We are all just what did they say? There was another saying about that people like you know, adults are just really the culmination of their experiences through their childhood and then all the way up. We're just a culmination of, like, who I am today really is just represents everything I've been through up into 46 years and however many days, you know, and however many hours and seconds. And then people wonder why I'm cranky. You know what I mean? It's because I've been through a whole hell of a lot of shit, and sometimes I'm tired. You know what I mean? And sometimes I don't want to hear any more bullshit, and sometimes I want people to be real with me, and I want the world to be real with me, and I want people to be on the same page, as I'm really tired of dealing with BS. You know what I mean? And so that's my attitude. And I notice that that's a lot of my siblings' attitude too. You know, they're not on their healing journey, right? But it's hard, you know, for many of us out here, like, who have had to deal with so much garbage and so much crap. You know what I mean? You develop. I couldn't help but develop these attitudes and these beliefs and these this stuff that I had to develop because it was forced on me. You know. And so now I'm kind of having to go back and say, okay, I need to change that belief system. I need to change the way that I relate to this world and the way that I relate to myself and how I treat myself, you know, and how I, you know, relate with myself. Really quite interesting. So he says, as long as we are focusing on experiences of our adult life without looking for how it is connected to our childhood, are not seeing reality clearly. So as long as you're looking at your last relationship from the perspective of blaming yourself or the other person for your problems, you are not being honest with yourself. So he says you're reacting from old black and white perspectives. So in order to change our experiences of life, we need to heal the causes, not keep focusing on the symptoms. In order to do this, that it's vital to start practicing discernment. Start practicing picking the baby out of the bathwater instead of swinging between reactive extremes. It's quite interesting. So yeah, so in order to change our experience of life, we need to heal the causes, not keep focusing on the symptoms. So in other words, I have to go back and say, okay, what caused me to feel this way? Like, what caused me to have hatred in my heart? Really? So over the last 4.5 years, that's what I've been doing. That's exactly what I've been doing. Is going back and saying, okay, it's playing the blame game, and just, you know, because I was always feeling very much the victim in this whole thing. And instead of just playing the blame game, I actually started to ask the questions, you know, what caused me to feel this way? You know, like, why do I have hatred in my heart? Why do I hate my parents? Like, why do I have all this anger and rage towards life? And why do I, you know, self-sabotage my life with relationship type stuff, you know? Why do I want to self-injure? Like, why do I want to kill myself? These big questions started to come up, because I had always been asking myself the question, why do I want to kill myself? You know, because my brother killed himself, another one of my brothers killed himself too, and I thought, how come I'm still running around on this planet planning my suicides? You know what I mean? Thinking how that one day I would go ahead and carry through with it. You know, it's ridiculous, but see, our family was suicidal, right? My mother was suicidal. My dad was really suicidal. My God, my brothers were suicidal. My sisters were suicidal, right? Well, one of them anyway. I don't know about the other one, but you know, this is just the thing. And then I have to sit there and say, well, why do I have these suicidal tendencies and suicidal thoughts? Well, I was put through hell as a child, and really all the way up into my teen years, and then had to deal with my adult parents, with my parents as an adult, right? Like, my parents should have really been taken out and shot or something. I don't know. That's just the way I'm feeling this morning. They were evil, twisted people who decided that they would hurt each other. And my mother used to say stuff like, I'm going to make your life miserable. And she'd be talking about my dad. She would be like, I'm going to make his life miserable. I'm going to ruin his life. And she really did. And he would say the same thing. You know what I mean? He would be like, I'm gonna ruin your mother's life, and I hate her. She's a whore. Both of them hated each other, and yet they stayed together, and they created this world of evil hatred for their children, and then they pulled their psychological bull crap and physical abuse and every other kind of abuse on us, and figured that we should just take it, you know, and that we should still be happy about it. We should still be happy to be in this dysfunctional, violent, abusive, unnatural, environment. You know what I mean? That children should not be growing up around. And then I'm supposed to be able to get along in society. You know, I mean, it's like, okay, right? You know, it's hard for me just to get along with anybody. Period. You know what I mean? So I've actually done really well. You know, and that's because I paid attention and I watched other people. A lot of people have asked me that before. They said, well, growing up in that mess, like, how did you even, you know what anything good was? What, you know, and it's just the fact that I watched other people. Well, I watched other families where I felt like, you know, they loved their children, they weren't hurting their children. It seemed like a completely different lifestyle than mine as a child, and I started watching these people, and I realized that, hey, there's a different way to live. You know, nobody has to hurt anybody. Nobody has to throw their garbage on you and just make you feel like garbage all the time. You know, I thought, hey, this is great. You know, so I started watching these other people and really picked up a lot of great behaviors, whereas my brothers didn't do that. And they were so high all the time, they really didn't pay much attention to anything. And so, you know, they didn't get any of that. So then they just sort of just you know, struggled and then killed themselves. And my sister, she was in denial and disassociative. So she's just always somewhere else. She's never really in the present. She's never really in the past. She's just in some fantasy world. I mean, who knows where she's even at. She doesn't even know where she's at. So it's just like, you know, it's too bad. But someday, hopefully, she'll figure it out. But yeah, this is the thing. I mean, so many of us will be in this position, and that's why I do these shows, really, because, like, I know that there's other people out here who've been through this. I knew kids growing up who had lived in homes very similar or worse than mine. And so, you know, I mean, I know there's a lot of people out here who are working on their healing journeys, you know, and I just say, just keep going. Keep looking for whatever's going to help, you know, and you have to really be in charge of your healing journey. What works for me may not work for you. What works for you may not work for me. And, like, everybody's different, so, you know, if you just keep looking for what's going to work for you. And, you know, if you've tried therapy or counseling and it just doesn't seem to be working for you, don't give up on it. You know, try another counselor, try another therapist, you know. Maybe you just haven't found the right one. You know, that's always a possibility. Or try group support. I really like group support. I don't trust one-on-one situations, period, and especially with counselors and therapists. So for me, it's more just because I don't trust people still, even today. So, and especially with something as delicate as what I went through as a child, I really don't want somebody giving me more grief. I've already had enough grief, you know what I mean? Like, I need somebody to help me, not hurt me. And so I don't trust counselors, I really don't, or therapists. But as far as, you know, group support, I'm more than willing to participate in a group because there's witnesses. There's always somebody there that hopefully could be a witness if something happened that I thought shouldn't be happening. You know what I mean? So, group support for me, that's the way it goes. Otherwise, I probably won't bother to seek therapy or counseling. So, but I would say whatever works for you, because a lot of people are totally cool with doing, you know, just don't want to do the group thing. They'd rather just do very much a private one-on-one, you know, counselor type thing, therapist type thing. But make sure whatever it is that you do, make sure you do allow yourself to get help and don't struggle on and don't spiral downward because of what we went through. I mean, we deserve to fight to get to the bottom of these issues, and we deserve to have a good life, right? But it won't happen if we don't do it. It won't happen if we don't take that first step and we don't say, okay, I'm the one that wants to make these changes. I'm the one that wants to have a better life. So how am I going to do this? So basically that's what Robert Bird is saying. Like, in order to change our experience of life, we need to heal the causes, not keep focusing on the symptoms. So in order to do that, it's vital to start practicing discernment, start practicing picking up the baby out of the water instead of swinging between reactive extremes, which is an interesting statement that he said there. Learning discernment is vital, not just in terms of the choices we make about who to trust, but also in terms of our perspective, our attitudes. So he says, we learned about life as children, and it's necessary to change the way we would intellectually view life in order to stop being the victim of the old tapes. And the old tapes, I mean, he's talking about, like, that old role that we played, those old tapes that run through our mind that tell us that we're lesser than, that we're no good. We're just like, for me, my mother used to call me a whore and a slut, and, you know, she used to say I was just an old child and I should have died with the other stillborn babies. Those are the old tapes that play around in my mind all the time. and just all the negative stuff that she told me. That she wished I had died, or that she should have killed me. She was always saying that. She would say, I should have killed you years ago, you know. And then she would be beating me at the same time as saying this stuff. So I mean, she'd be just hammering it in there, you know, I hate you and things like this, right? That's all that negative stuff that just keeps playing around those old tapes, right? So he says, learning discernment, you know, it really we have to be able to figure out who we're going to trust, you know. We also need to know what our needs are. So we have to be able to set boundaries. Boundary work is very important, and we need to know what we're going to put up with and what we're not, and how we're going to allow people to treat us and how we're not, you know, what we're not going to allow. And we have to be sure that we're going to treat people properly too. Right? So there's a whole boundary things that people need to do. And we learn. So he says, by looking at becoming conscious of our attitudes, definitions, and perspectives, we can start discerning what works for us and what does not work. And he says we can then start making choices about whether our intellectual view of life is serving us, or if it is setting us up to be victims because we are expecting life to be something which it is not, which it is not. It's very much, you know, true. I mean, it's like many times because, well, it's just sort of, people can't really help it. It's sort of what we've been set up to believe, that, you know, if you don't have a 3-car garage and a yacht and all this stuff and a Harvard degree, that you just don't measure up, you know. And if you don't have some high, you know, executive office job on the 40th, 50th floor, you know, especially with a window corner office, you really don't measure up. You know what I mean? And that's that dream, that false dream that they put in front of everybody, that you have to have, you know, this life that really consists of material things, and that it's not about being happy, you know, with who you are. If you don't even look right, you have to go have plastic surgery. Right, and then if you don't look like what society says you should look like, you have to change your looks. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. This society that we are in is so dysfunctional and so twisted that I actually don't pay much attention to it. I really don't. I actually spend a whole lot of time ignoring it because it's such garbage. You know what I mean? It's like if you don't look like Barbie, then you don't measure up. If you don't look like Ken, you know, as the Ken doll, as a guy, you just don't measure up. And if you don't have some executive job with some big old, you know, 5-story home, you don't measure up. And I mean, that's ridiculous because that's not reality, and everybody knows it. But anybody who would buy into that is just obviously not thinking properly, right? Life is not about that. You know what I mean? But there's so many times people will set themselves up to be victims of this stuff, and then at the end of the road, they're crying the blues. I didn't get that, you know, I didn't get all that stuff that I wanted, the yacht and the vacation home in the Bahamas. It's like, well, who does? I mean, how many people are going to get that? You know what I mean? Like, we can't base our life on what society says we should have or should be or anything else. You know what I mean? Like, because society is dysfunctional and twisted and messed up. That's the issue. So I really like what Robert Burney has to say. He says one of the core characteristics of the disease of codependence is intellectual polarization, black and white thinking. Rigid extremes, good or bad, right or wrong, love it or leave it, 1 or 10. Codependence does not allow any gray area or only black and white extremes. So his life is not black and white. He says life involves the interplay of black and white. In other words, the gray area in where life takes place. A big part of the healing process is learning the numbers 2 through 9, recognizing that life is not black and white. And he says clarity comes from changing our perspective so that we can see the different levels involved in life dynamic and not buy into the black and white perspective of the disease. So the disease of codependence, as I define it, he says, is centered in the ego, which was damaged, traumatized, and programmed by, very dysfunctionally in early childhood, right? By whoever was bringing up the child, right? Or in even just society itself, right? So it's quite interesting. You can scroll down through here. This is from www.joy2meu.com, and that's joy, the number 2, meu.com, and that's Robert Burney's web pages. He's got some great stuff here. So we'll look at this tomorrow. We'll at least continue on in it tomorrow. And tomorrow morning, same time, same place, One Child Abuse Survivor to another 6 a.m. And see how far we can get. We're only about a third of the way down the page. I mean, he's got a lot of material dealing with this, balance and working through the fear of codependence and inner child work. So hopefully, you'll have a chance to go and look at that yourself. It's a great website. So thanks, everybody, for being here. Appreciate it. I'll be back on again, like to say, tomorrow morning and then tomorrow night. And Dreamcatchers Talk Radio. Be sure and check out Dreamcatchers Talk Radio here on Blog Talk Radio. I do host a lot of those shows as well, 4 nights a week, and so I hope that you go check those out. Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers, And, we're out here trying to stop child abuse. Be sure and check out our work, www.dreamcatchersforabusedchildren.com, right? So thanks, everybody. If you can't cope or you can't, like I made a commitment really to myself that if I couldn't cope, I would call a crisis line or I would get some help, right? So you do the same thing. Like if you're having a hard time and you're just thinking, man, I don't know how I'm going to cope, you make sure you get yourself some help, right? Don't allow yourself to suffer on and don't allow yourself to hurt yourself or hurt somebody else. You get some help and you do the right thing by yourself, right? Have a great day, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.